and welcome to Mr. Valentin's YouTube video for Lord of the Flies. We've gone over the format of your test and what you need to know. So we're going to review today characters, we're going to review some important symbols, we're going to go over the plot diagram, and some literary terms. So let's get started right away. The first character that you obviously need to know, who is our protagonist of the story, is Ralph. So, things you should know about Ralph. Obviously, he's our protagonist. We know he was elected chief, but he was elected chief simply because he's good-looking. The text states about Ralph, he was old enough, 12 years old in a few months, to have lost the prominent tummy of childhood, and not yet old enough for adolescence to have made him awkward. You could see now that he might make a boxer, as far as width and heaviness of shoulders went, but there was a mildness about his mouth and eyes that proclaimed no devil. Alright, so, good-looking, in this version, alright, they describe him as athletic, alright, like a boxer. He seems to be elected leader with no experience, and he seems to have no good qualities, initially anyway. As the text continues, we discover that he is a natural leader. And we find out some other miscellaneous information, such as his father is a naval officer. Which shows that, at least initially, he's a bit naive about how he'll be rescued, but then later on, it kicks in his survival instincts. So, Ralph, obviously, main character, important. Secondary characters of great importance. So first and foremost, for secondary characters, we have Piggy. Piggy's described in the text as the fat boy. We don't even know his real name. It seems nobody cares to ask, even when they start making fun of him. We know there's a very tense relationship between Piggy and Jack. And we know that even the relationship that's established between Ralph and Piggy is a fractured one. And when I say fractured, I mean it's kind of broken. It's not an equal relationship. We know that his parents died when he was young, and we know he lives with his auntie. Alright, he seems to have some type of Cockney kind of accent, and when we say Cockney, it's like almost our equivalent of like maybe the South. But again, the story takes place, or at least these boys are British, and so when he says asthma, alright, it sounds like Asmar, and so the kids make fun of him for that. But he is kind of this symbol of intelligence, so I would make note of that in some form. Our other character, of course, and let me just do a little switcheroo here, is Jack. Jack Merridew. And that's important, that's his full name. He seems to be the one with the most leadership skills. He rules the hunters, or the choir, who become the hunters. the text describes him as... It reads on page 20 of your text. Inside the floating cloak, he, Jack, was tall, thin, and bony, and his hair was red beneath the black cap. His face was crumpled and freckled and ugly without silliness. Out of this face stared two light blue eyes, frustrated now, and turning or ready to turn to anger. Alright, so he's described as red-haired, and rather ugly. At least for Jack, I would note that this anger that they're indicating early on is clearly what we would refer to as foreshadowing. All right, and we've already seen him lash out against Piggy. And there's some noticeable tension between Jack and Piggy, and Jack and Ralph. So just keep that all in mind for our other characters. So one of the first characters we want to start talking about is Simon. He's described as the visionary of the group. He has a penchant for just kind of passing out. There's also something kind of dark lurking around him, that he has like jet black hair, and he seems a bit like an outcast. So just keep that in mind. Followed by that, we have Sam and Eric. Alright, twins. Alright, it's really Sam and Eric. And so far they haven't played too much of a role, but just know that they're twins. Alright, they're supposed to keep the signal fire going. We also want to know about Johnny. And as far as we know all about Johnny, is that he's just one of the smallest little ones. Not the smallest, but one of the smallest little ones. And in just one quick scene, and it passes by in just a second, he's being particularly mean to Percival, because everyone's mean to Percival. So just take note of that. We also have Henry. And again, Henry hasn't played too much of a role, but he's the biggest of the little ones. And he was the one who was kind of pranked, maybe even bullied by Roger. So we'll get into that. Let me just line this up. Good. Alright, so there's that. We then have Maurice, who's one of the big uns. Alright, and Maurice, as far as we're concerned right now, is just going to become one of Jack's key supporters. And after that, we have Roger. Roger's the one who, in the one scene, ends up throwing rocks at the little ones. Alright, so we know Roger is one of the meanest kids on the island. So just take note of that. And then finally we have Percival Wemyss Madison. And Percival is the little one who has is always crying. He constantly is bullied, and he's the one who introduces the idea of the beast. Both him and Johnny seem to be pretty equals in that respect. We also have some symbols that we should be aware of. We've kind of talked about how the story is a post-World War II allegory. Some people say it is a World War II allegory, but it's really more closely associated with the Cold War. So we have some important symbols throughout the story. Ideas such as the conch, which goes on to represent order. Anytime we see the color pink, it's associated with innocence. Piggy's glasses, which are a symbol of society and intelligence. There's the beastie. And we know the beastie is a symbol of not just fear, but irrational fear. And for now, those are the, one more, sorry. The makeup and the clay that they paint on themselves, particularly Jack. Alright, that becomes a symbol of savagery. Alright, which is kind of like viciousness and evil. So just make special notes of those as well. You should know your literary terms for your plot diagram. Again, I teach the plot diagram in a 6-point kind of variation. The first part, instead of calling the introduction, we're going to use it as the exposition, which we know introduces the characters and the setting. The dotted line, the moment when our plot can progress forward, we refer to as the inciting incident. And then we have that line going up, which is usually referred to as the rising action, but I like to build your vocabulary, make it a little more sophisticated. And so we're going to call that the complication. And at the very top, we know we have the climax, which we haven't gotten to yet, and will be some time, but we should know about those things. And we have the falling action, but again, more sophisticated vocabulary. So we're going to refer to that as the denouement. You don't need to know that for the test, but if we're doing the plot diagram, it might as well be thorough. And of course, at the end, we have the resolution. Great. On your test, what you'll see is a moment described in the story. So what you'll see is something like, we meet Ralph. And so you need to indicate at what point in the story did that happen. And of course, you would say exposition. You might say something like, the boat passes by. And we know the boat passes by in the complication. When the kid dies in a fire, we know that happens in the inciting incident. And something like finding the conch would happen in the exposition. Just a couple more. Jack tries to kill the first pig, but he fails. When did that happen? And that happens in the early part of the book, which is the exposition. The kids let the fire go out. And we know the kids let the fire go out in the complication. One more. Jack ends up killing the first pig. When did that happen? Exposition, inciting incident, complication. For your test, you should pick nothing in the climax, because we haven't gotten there, nothing in the denouement, and nothing in the resolution. So we know it's 1, 2, or 3. So Jack killing the first pig would be complication. So know those terms, know how to define them. Exposition, where we meet the characters in the setting. The inciting incident is the moment when the story moves forward, and the complication, which are the events leading to the climax. We then have our other literary terms. I'm also going to throw up here foreshadowing, which I did not pick. So let's define these literary terms first, and you should know how to define them. An allusion is a reference to a literary or historical person, place, or thing. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds. Foreshadowing hints at future events. Imagery, visual descriptors that enhance the story. Metaphor, which is a comparison that does not use like or as. Personification. Personification, which is giving lifelike qualities to non-living things or inanimate objects. Of course, perfect. We should also add simile. And a simile is a comparison that does use like or as. Great. So those are the literary terms you need to know. On your test, what you'll have are quotes. And you'll need to identify what literary term they are. So, for example, you might see a quote that says, Piggy acted in an Einstein manner. So this could be two literary terms. First literary term it could be would be a metaphor, because we're making a comparison of Piggy to somebody. But we also want to know that it could be an allusion, because we're making a reference to a famous historical person. Here's another. Another example would be, soon the cool blue ocean grew to a new view. And again, it'll be multiple choice, so you'll see a list, A through E. It might say allusion, alliteration, it might say exposition, simile, protagonist, something like that. All right, so soon the cool blue ocean grew to a new view. So what would you choose for this? Well, depending on what the options are, you may end up choosing imagery, all right, because we're getting that visual element. But we're hearing a very specific sound. Blue, cool, grew, new, view. All right, we're getting that kind of cool ooh sound. So we would note that this is definitely assonance. Let's try two more examples. So you might see a quote that says, Ralph shook the conch and blew into it. It mooed like a cow. So what we want to look at, of course, is that it mooed like a cow. So we immediately know that this is 100% a simile. One more example. The sun seemed to smile on this perfect day. Okay, so we're seeing the sun smiling, which we know is an unusual kind of phrasing. So obviously, this is giving lifelike characteristics, so this would be personification. And so that's what you need to know, all right? Your characters, your symbols, your plot diagram, your literary terms, and how to apply those literary terms. The last portion, as you know, is a reading comprehension section which, not that you can't study for, but you want to look at your notes for to see how we did that. That you do the close annotation, you answer multiple choice questions on it, and you give complete short answers, which include support, which include defining the topic, and defining the literary term if necessary. If there's any questions, please see me for extra help. And that's pretty much it. Have a good weekend. Bye.